Hi, Todd VanDenburg here with VanDenburg Capital Management and another Uncommon Sense update. So in the media this last week or so, I've been reading a lot of reports of people sort of painting a doom and gloom picture about, the Federal Reserve is going to stop, buying bonds and injecting cash into the banks. And as a result, that's it's gonna hurt the markets because, the financial system really needs that cash. And I guess what I'm here, if you don't want to watch the whole video, I'll just give you the answer right now. I think that's a bunch of malarkey. And now I'm going to explain why. So first off, I want to show a chart that I showed during the financial crisis of '09, and I've updated it to show current data. But if you look at this chart, what you see is that prior to '09, the Federal Reserve really never did this kind of purchase of bonds and injecting cash to this level. They always had a little bit of money that they were using to try to stimulate the economy, but nothing like what we saw post 2009. And again, as the COVID crisis hit last year, you can see another spike in the Federal Reserve's asset purchases. And again, they're buying bonds and giving cash to the banks. And the thought is that the cash that they give to the banks is going to make it into the economy. And the reality is that's not really what's happening for the most part. So now I'm going to show you another chart that shows what's called the money supply. It's the M2, and the money supply represents how much money is actually in the economy, not sitting in the banks, but actually sitting in the economy, checking, savings accounts, that kind of stuff. So now we look at this chart and we see that in 2009, if you recall from that last chart, there was a huge spike in the Federal Reserve's activity of buying bonds and injecting cash into the economy. But wait a minute, this chart that shows money that's actually in the economy, in people's checking and savings accounts, it didn't spike in '09. It basically goes up, coincidentally, at about the rate of the population growth in the United States. But now we get to 2020, and you look at the right side of this chart, and you do see a bit of a spike starting in 2020. And again, looking back at that other chart, you would see, well, the Federal Reserve also was injecting more money in 2020. So that money must have made it into the economy then. Again, I'm here to say no. So now I'm going to show you a different chart. It's the federal debt. And as we all know, since the COVID crisis, the federal government has been injecting trillions of dollars into the economy in the hopes of stimulating activity. And what I'm seeing, because again, the Federal Reserve's dollars that they're buying bonds and giving that cash to the banks is not represented in the M2. It's only when that money makes it out into the economy and people actually have it in their hands and start using it that it would be reflected in the M2. So what I believe is happening, and it has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve, is the federal government is borrowing so much money and injecting it into the economy that you do see the money making it into the economy, as evidenced by this final chart I'm going to show you, which is the amount of money people have in savings right now. It's the personal savings amount. And what you can see is that there's over $1 trillion more money in savings right now, households that have saved money, than pre-pandemic. So as the Federal Reserve starts to do their tapering, I'm going to show one more chart because you can never have enough charts. So again, to just bolster my thought that the Federal Reserve's activities are not the cause of this increase in money supply, there's one last chart, and that's the amount of money that banks are keeping on deposit at the Fed. So imagine this, right? The Fed buys a bond from the bank, and the bank has a choice. It can lend that money out, and that is stimulative to the economy, or it can deposit that money back at the Federal Reserve and earn interest on it. So this chart that I'm going to show you right now shows how much money banks are holding at the Fed. And this chart is really telling because when you go back to prior to 2009, the Fed didn't really pay interest on excess deposits. And they started, after the financial crisis, paying interest on money that they had given to the banks. So this is crazy. The Federal Reserve gives money to the banks deposit it back at the Fed and earn interest on it. And this chart is showing that the banks are depositing huge amounts of this Fed money, just depositing it back at the Fed and earning interest. So the fact that the Fed is going to pull some of that money back, all the banks have to do, it's not going to slow the economy down. All the banks have to do is just take the money out of their Federal Reserve savings account and hand the money back to the Fed. So when you hear things in the media about the stock market's going to crash, or the stock market volatility is because of there's anticipation of economic slowdown because the Fed's going to stop injecting, buying these bonds and giving the banks cash, just remember these charts, right? The banks have so much money on deposit at the Fed that the Federal Reserve could stop injecting cash, start calling it back, and they'd have to call back almost $4 trillion worth of money from the banks before the banks would ever have to do anything about money that they've put out in circulation. So sorry about all the charts. There's a lot of stuff here, but whenever I hear this doom and gloom, fear-mongery stuff, and the markets are a little volatile, and because when people read this kind of stuff in the media, they can get a little scared, and that can cause volatility. But investors don't make decisions based upon what they read in the media and the fear or greed that might result from those reports. They look at the data, and that's why these charts are so important. So, just be careful, and if you're an investor, just follow this data and don't be too worried about what the Fed is doing. Be more focused on how much money do the banks have sitting at the Fed, and how much money do we have in savings, we the people, because all that extra money in savings, people, when they get a lot of money in savings, they tend to spend it. And that is stimulative for the economy. So if anybody has any questions about this or any other financial matter, please, shoot me an email, reply to this update. I'm happy to answer any question that you might have, but that was your update. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a like, give me a share, and I'll be back again soon with another Uncommon Sense update. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to be the first to hear of more Uncommon Sense updates like these, please click the subscribe button below. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again.